Hello there. Welcome to the Interaction Field series of live streams that we've got here. The reason that we're doing these series of live streams are very special. We've had them every day this week, and they're to celebrate the launch of the book, The Interaction Field, which was written by a chap called Erich Joachimstahler, who just happens to be the founder of Vivaldi. So I'm Dave, I'm a creative director at Vivaldi, and I am going to introduce this. But I'm also wanting you to get involved because I'm going to come back later in the show with questions from you. So if you've got some questions about today's show, and I hope you will do because it's going to be a great conversation, then you put them in the chat and I will be right there to look at the questions, to pick the best ones, and then to pose those questions to our panelists today. So we have two people today. First of all, let me introduce you to the man of the week. This is Erich Joachimstahler, who is the CEO, the founder of Vivaldi. Hello, Erich. Right behind you is your book.
Yes, it is indeed.
So your book is available right now in the States. I think some other countries have to wait a little bit for it, but they can do what I did and get it on Kindle until the actual physical copy arrives. So that's what I recommend. So everyone can read it right now. Now, we've got an amazing guest on the show today. We have got Tiffani Bova, and let me tell you a little bit about Tiffani. She's the growth and innovation evangelist at Salesforce. So, of course, not a small role we've got here. She's an influential thinker on customer experience, on digital transformation, the future of work, and sales. She's got a best-selling book, which is called Growth IQ. Get smarter about the choices that will make or break your business. She's the host of What's Next with Tiffani Bova, which is one of the top 100 business and marketing podcasts on iTunes. I mean, the list goes on. It's incredible. She's a Thinkers 50 radar class of 29. You know, I mean, this week, Erich, we have had so many people who have been in the Thinkers 50. I think we've only got another 45 people to go and we're done. We'll have ticked them all off.
But Tiffany's on the top of it, there we go.
Absolutely. Yep. So let us introduce Tiffani Bova.
Hello.
Tiffany, I'm going to put you at the top here where you belong. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. Thank you for having me. From New York and London, I'm in Los Angeles, so we've got it covered.
There we go.
Get the whole world wrapped around. And you're originally from Hawaii, is that right?
I am, and I keep trying to get home, but I can't get. I just had to change my flight again this morning because they're staying on lockdown for another 2 weeks. So I keep trying, but LA is not a bad place to be stuck outside of the fires. But I'm thrilled to be with you guys here today.
Yeah, great.
So, Erich, I will leave this in your fair hands.
That's fairly easy then. Thank you so much. Your job, at least. Tiffani, thank you so much for being here because I read the book. I thought about talking about growth is really something we should be on the top of mind. You look at companies. At least how I see it, some who have an exponential growth in the last 6 months or maybe the year, and some have actually growth stalled. And you have a recipe for growth, and it fits very well into my book that I wanted to talk about that. So tell me, so what I understand from the book is that you say that there are 10 paths to growth, and what you must do is 3 steps. First, you need to assess the market, the context. Then there is a combination of these various growth paths, and then you need to have a part on sequencing. So tell me about, would you from your perspective, what is the context that provides this opportunity we speak today for growth? How do you see it's happening right now for companies?
Well, thank you for the question. And thank you for knowing so much about my book. I appreciate it. Here's what I'd say. It really, the opening of Growth IQ was kind of the following. One is, the one thing about growth is it's never one thing. So you kind of have to put that right there. The second thing is, one of the opening stats I use in the book was from Bain & Company, saying that the number one reason why brands sort of smaller than 5 billion and larger than 5 billion, although that's a big difference between those two things, especially if you're a small business, but stay with this for just a second, is that the number one reason why they're unable to create consistent and profitable growth was internal inertia. And right at the end of that sentence, I then said, unless you have a black swan event, which, we are now in, right? So
that's right.
I would say that there's a couple of things, from a growth perspective, looking internally on things that can be improved. Unfortunately, minus, from a empathetic and compassionate standpoint, there's lots of really terrible things going on from a business perspective, a human perspective, education, and all of those things. On the flip side, as you mentioned, there are some brands that are growing during this time. And so what is the reasons that's happening? Why is that happening? And what can you learn from what they're doing? And I spend quite a bit of time talking to customers, in my day job, if you will, at Salesforce as the chief growth evangelist, right? And I would tell you that everybody is really taking a hard look at the people and process side of the business to make sure they shore themselves up for when we come out the other side of this. And not that they're waiting to get back to growth, but are they going to get back to the right kind of growth when we come out the other side? So I think that that's really the way to start the conversation. As you said, right, it has to start with context.
It has to start with context, and what I see is, if you look at the top companies right now, the ones that have created most market capitalization, like sometimes we refer to them as GAFAs or FANGAs, the Facebook, Apple, Netflix, and of the world. I mean, there's something they do that I don't see in every other company, and that is they shift. They're not just selling a product, they are selling something else. They're connecting with consumers and customers in a new way, a demand side. Look, if you think about this, you wrote in your book about Lego or GoPro. And if you look at GoPro as a simple example, of course they do have that camera. But you can tell me that a great iPhone I have here, or a great product from Canon, Sony, and so forth, couldn't beat what GoPro does. But the value that GoPro creates isn't just in the factory, in the product itself, which is great. The accessories, if you are an adrenaline freak, you call them like that. But it's the value is they find new ways of connecting with customers, and I think perhaps one of those growth passes that companies need to think about is how do you connect in new ways in this changing way with consumers. That's what I suggest.
Yeah, so I'd say this, the comment you just made about could Canon or Sony or somebody else have done what GoPro did? I feel the same way about another story I use in the book called Red Bull. And could Pepsi or Coke or anybody else have done the same thing? Absolutely. And you can see now sort of the master of doing it is Amazon just unbundling a solution. And so GoPro didn't want to replace the iPhone. That was not what they were trying to do, or create a phone that had a camera. They're unbundling what do people use and want from that. And the user of a GoPro, it would not have used a cell phone as their camera or carried a DSLR, on their shoulder to do it. It was very specific. And so this is everything about the concept jobs to be done, which Clayton Christensen is another Thinkers 50. He's in the Hall of Fame for Thinkers 50. And, ultimately it was about, are customers or people buying a drill, or are they buying a 1/4-inch hole? I actually think they're not buying either. I think they're buying a shelf on a wall, or building a bike, or a cabinet, or something together, right? And so if you think about that from the GoPro perspective, it's like, let me decouple the camera and understand the different use cases. And how do I solve that business need for that particular kind of user, which was an adrenaline junkie, someone who's going to get muddy and dirty and jump out of a rocket ship, 30,000 feet up in the air, whatever it was, and start to create this kind of sports connection community of people who want to share these really crazy stunts using a camera that can ride with them, right? Or fly with them, or whatever it was. And so that's how you have to think about it. If you're thinking right now that your business is facing a growth stall, or you can't see the forest through the
Yes.
trees of what's the way out of what's going on right now, I would recommend you think that same way, right? Decoupling, deconstructing an entire stack of a set of services. You could even say it about Uber. Uber didn't want to become a car company. They wanted to solve a very specific transportation need from point A to point B when someone did not have either their car or a car at all. And so, that's how you have to look at it. And so GoPro or Red Bull, we want to solve a very specific niche. And by the time Red Bull was doing so well in Europe in their home market, they expanded into Europe before they ever came to North America. By that time, another sort of management term, they had created a very strong beachhead to keep any of its competitors away, and have continued to do it. And what Red Bull has done so well is they've stayed narrow. They didn't start selling soda pop or water or juices. They've stayed very true to who they are, and only recently adding flavors, right? So I think that's the point of focus and understanding the context, and then decoupling to solve the jobs to be done.
That's it. In fact, you see that's the parallel. It wasn't about the traditional way. You can see this in another category right now, like for example the seltzer category, the hard seltzer category. It's a high growth category. Like let's say what is it called? White Claw is one company, Truly is another company, Budweiser Seltzer is another company. They come in the next once they are successful in this market, a true seltzer. What's the next step? The typical step is flavor management. You come up with variations. That's what Red Bull didn't do. Red Bull actually built solve for something very different for customers or for consumers. Just like your example with GoPro, you said it's not about it's about the camera, but it's about enabling these adrenaline junkies to share their exploits on the water or in the snow with everybody else. And I think that's the jobs to be done here. So the thinking has to shift from, what is that product and what are we pushing out right now versus what are the jobs to be done we are solving for? I think that mindset is sort of perhaps, leveraging the context and starters to think at that point to develop the combination of strategies, growth IQ strategies.
Absolutely. And you can even look at the top high performing companies that are continuing to grow at this time and just watch what they've done over the last 1 or 2 years. Look, to me, growth is a thinking game, full stop. You can outthink your competition. You can figure out, how do I decouple to create a really meaningful product that will engage with that customer, that particular customer set, that you understand what they're looking for. And more importantly, what they may not know they need today. I mean, if you look at anyone who's really disrupted, it's because they've looked out across the landscape and they have the ability to think, what is someone going to need, 5 or 10 years from now? And I always pull this out when I make this comment. I mean, how many people knew that they wanted, a version of an iPod in their pocket that has now made its way right all the way to this iPhone? And so you don't have to be Steve Jobs, or you don't have to be Jeff Bezos, or even our CEO, Mark Benioff, or any others that have been really, really disruptive. What you have to be able to do is really understand your customer, the context of the market, and what your company can actually handle, and what your culture can actually foster. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have a culture of innovation or risk taking or any of those things, trying new things makes people really uncomfortable. And right now, in this height of the pandemic, everyone is really sensitive and anxiety and stressed about all kinds of things. And so adding to that and making them feel like they don't know what they're doing, you have to have a really strong leader to guide them through this time and really helping them understand, to come up with these new ideas so that we can serve our customers not only today, tomorrow, but in the future. And I think that's what's really, really important, is know your customers really, really well. And that was the first growth path, was customer experience. And I start off the book by saying, they have to be your true north. Your employees are the most important thing that you have. And so you want to make sure your employees are happy, because the fastest way to get your customers to love your brand is to get your employees to love their job. So that connection between employee and customer is really, really critical.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That unfortunately is often also oftentimes broken. You have a disconnect between what the customers, the frontline salesperson that actually knows the customers, visits the customers, and those people that are in charge of running the rest of the machine. So in I think that is a very good. I mean, it's almost, it's almost, in order to make this work, what you say, you almost need to have a company that has no borders. The classic idea of having organizational boundaries, this is inside and this is outside, this is us, this is the customer, and sometimes we used to call it boundary spanning roles that connect the inside of the organization with the outside. And it may be that we need to think of a company in a much more fluid, much more open way in this day and age, rather than as okay, this is the outside, these are our customers. So that connection that you write in the first chapter in your book actually takes place.
Absolutely, and I think that's really important. But it isn't just that classic statement, break down silos between sales and service and marketing, or whatever the groups might be. It isn't so much trying to break down the silos, because I think silos are important. They are different roles, they have different remits. What I think is important is creating an environment where there is connection at some level, whether it's metrics, whether it's that everyone understands their role in the corporate vision. So for example, it's employee first and customer centricity. So if there's an opportunity where you're able to serve the customer in a new and unique way, how do we capture that so we can learn it around the organization? How do we keep communication and collaboration open and fluid? And if everybody understands their individual role and how it plays towards something like the Net Promoter Score, around customer experience, or the customer satisfaction score, but I'm a call center rep, or I'm a sales rep, or I'm a marketer, and I don't see the connection to the overall corporate goals, I sort of just come to work every day and I do my job. But when you see brands that are very focused on employee experience, customer experience, and it's tied together, those silos, even though they're there, are invisible, right? Are invisible between teams. And I think that's where you have a great opportunity. Once again, going back to this moment in time, this is a leader's job to help steward the ship. Make everyone safe and comfortable, that you've got a plan. But I would tell you that the best way to get people engaged is to talk to your customers, ask them what they want, but also talk to your employees on a regular basis so that you can understand what they need. And if those two things come together, there's very, very little that a competitor could do. And, so many times I see competitors try and copy what the other one is doing. They're watching what they're doing. And when they do that, then they replicate it. And the one thing I'll tell you here is you're the only company with your brand, with your people, with your vision, with your values, with your customers, with your systems. Like, you're the only one that's you. And so I don't mind you looking at competitors, but make sure you understand what makes your company really different and unique, and why people want to, one, work there, two, do business with you, right? You need to understand what that is, and that's where you want to capitalize. And that's something your competition is just not going to have. So that's where I like to say that if you can really get that right, your culture, the way you operate, the mental models you use, which is really some work from Mark Bonchek. He's a great guy, talks about mental models, is ultimately, like, that's a competitive differentiator that you can defend. But, a product is a product is a product. And there might be slight variations, but as a consumer, I might not either care about the variations or I don't understand them. And so it's not interesting to me. But if I have a much better experience with your people, that I remember.
What's so interesting is that everything you said, there is actually close to home a really nice blueprint of how to build that kind of a company, how to connect the outside and the inside. How do you actually focus on the customers? How to get everybody excited about it? You know what that is, the company? I read it here on page 162 in your book. The company is called Salesforce. If I may just highlight a few things. When Salesforce started selling software as a service, It didn't just sell a product, through that was created somewhere in a design lab or something, and then pushed out by salespeople. The way Salesforce did is they said, we give 5 users a free usage. Guess what happens? When you give 5 users a free usage of this software and they download whatever they need, the inside of the organization, your salespeople, your support people, your R&D people, your programmers, the whole Salesforce organization is geared toward what are these 5 users do with my technology that they just downloaded from our software, they downloaded from the cloud. How do we support them to use that product? How do we help them to make the product work better in their environment? So basically, Salesforce, the success, the origin, as you described this in your book beautifully, is in a way following that model that you just described. Maybe we can learn a lot from history in some ways of successful companies, and you are at the center of this.
Well, I would say this. Look, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There's nothing in Growth IQ that someone's going to read that and go, my goodness, I never thought that was a way to grow. I might call it something different. I might frame it a little bit differently, but I did that on purpose. I sort of went out and read 75 of the best business books. I've had tens of thousands of conversations with companies and customers and people with my current role here at Salesforce. But obviously, previously, I was a research fellow at Gartner, helping small startups in Europe and Asia and the US, right, get to some kind of size, mid-sized businesses to grow, and then enterprises to expand even further across the globe. And through that, I found patterns. And so for me, I feel like I was a growth anthropologist, because the book is a look back on very unique and specific points of time where I said, okay, hold on. This particular company was at a crossroads. They could either do this or they could do that. When they did this, this is what happened. Here's why. Here's why there's a great lesson in here for you. And so it's 30 very short stories to give you a window into the decision-making process and the results of those decisions. And I can tell you that each growth path, if you will, there's 10. There's 2 positive stories that this is how someone has made that decision and grown. Here's a cautionary tale. So one story where someone made the decision and it didn't work out for them, and why didn't it work? The last chapter, called Unconventional Strategies as a growth model or growth lever, is really the replacement of that freemium model you were just talking about that Salesforce started out with. It's sort of take 5, give it away, see how they use it, et cetera. Yep. And I wanted to try to find the next freemium model from a growth perspective. And I instead leaned into unconventional strategies, which to take what my CEO, Mark Benioff, talks about, and he's just written in his new book, Trailblazer, was business is the greatest platform for change, right? Doing well by doing good, purpose over profit, seeing companies that are not-for-profit companies, but using that mindset to give back. And so you buy a pair of shoes, you give a pair of shoes, right? Buy a pair of glasses, they give a pair of glasses. Or they may donate a portion of profits to charity, or whatever it might be. Even pivoting to the UN Sustainability Development Goals, right? The SDGs. And so that was sort of a pleasant surprise for me at the end of the book, that it really inspired me to close out the chapter with, or the book itself with, starting with the customer and sort of ending with business, the greatest platform for change. And so, I think that the aha moment in the book, and you mentioned it at the beginning, was really sequence, the order in which companies make those decisions and then execute on those decisions is where I found the difference between success and failure. So that was the aha moment, much more so than the 10 paths, right? The 10 paths should feel familiar, and that's on purpose. They should feel digestible and understandable. That's on purpose, right? I tried to make it a very light and easy read. By the time you get to the 3rd path, I'm hoping that in your mind, you're already solving those problems that I'm highlighting in the book. That means you understand the framework.
What I really like about the book is that these 30 different examples that you have. But what I think is important is, in this day and age, nobody does it alone. So while in your book you describe the individual case studies and good illustrations from Lego, what you just said about Salesforce and Mark Benio's new book, I think this is where things are going. We all live in what I call an interaction field, and so it isn't just that we drive the profits, we drive the growth, we compete in a marketplace. Here's a strategy to make more money, and then if we feel good, we donate, or we have some social purpose to or support our social purpose to the business. I think what's sort of important in this day and age, we're all connected. All companies are connected. So value creation isn't just taking place in the company. It's value creation. In my book, at least, it's in an ecosystem. So Apple is not only creating value for Apple, but also for developers that are producing apps for the App Store, which makes Apple more successful. So figuring out how do you create an interaction field, I call, of companies your example in the book, you talked about the collaboration and partnership between Red Bull and GoPro as another example. I think that's where we look in with a hyper connectivity we live in today. Everything connects so beautifully. We connect here across 3 different parts of the world. We can create that shared value. So I think building that model, I think your strategies in your book sort of like lead toward that. But I think that today, I think this is where we need to sort of evolve toward that, these ecosystems I call an interaction field.
Yeah, and I would tell you, you nailed it. The one thing that's been really exciting for me to watch during this time is the partnerships that have been formed over the last 6 months from a business perspective. Some of them are very natural partnerships to, fill in supply chains or expand reach or sales or manufacturing or distribution or support services. Like that's a natural. But the other thing I've really enjoyed watching is this kind of co-opetition, both of which have paths.
Yes.
I have a partnership path and I have a co-opetition path in the book. And co-opetition is working with someone who you may view as a competitor. And so, in the book, I use the example of the airlines, and many people who fly today don't realize that when it was a regulated industry, airlines, you would get off one airline, you'd have to literally, change terminals, take your bag, check back in. And when it deregulated and they all could share information, that's how I can fly from Los Angeles to London, which, you're in. And then I could go to, I see that some people are visiting us from Munich and Buenos Aires, right? I could then go on to those places and my bags would follow me and it would be a very seamless transition. Well, that's co-opetition because you could say, well, it's an airline against an airline. But remember, not all airlines fly everywhere in the world. And so for me as a customer, as a passenger, it's much better if the airlines work together because it makes a better experience for me. And so while they may overlap in very small markets, the bigger part of the pie that they don't gives me a better experience. And so if you've considered partnering or even working with a competitor, that's once again why you have to deconstruct. What do you do? What do they do? Where's the overlap? And if it's slight, it could be 20%. I mean, I'll just use Amazon again. In the US, Amazon works with a retailer called Kohl's, which you could argue is a competitor.
Yes.
But what Amazon did before they had Whole Foods, before they started opening up their Prime stores and their Go stores, was they needed that last mile distribution for me as a consumer to be able to return something very easily. And so they created a relationship between the two. You could argue, well, I could buy something, a t-shirt at Kohl's or on Amazon. So they compete. But in the broader picture, Kohl's is like, look, if I can get Amazon customers to come in my store, they might buy something, even though they're returning. And maybe they buy what they really wanted when they're returning what they didn't want. And so you see that happening time and time again. And so that's that unique, from a co-opetition standpoint. But the partnership like GoPro and Red Bull, that was if we have similar, similar customers.
Yes.
And, people who drink Red Bull might be GoPro users because they're both sort of, adrenaline junkies. Yep. That works very well. And you create this community of raving fans that, have this virtuous cycle of talking about you on your behalf, sharing information, creating content, putting it out there, using your name, all in the spirit of the fact that they feel like they belong to this community of like-minded people.
If you want to solve for in this pandemic, in this period of time, for the jobs to be done, what customers or consumers really want, you can't do it alone. You can run an airline from point A to point B, or you can, but you cannot solve what you really want to do as a traveling evangelist, if you will, and a traveling speaker, so to speak. And it almost goes in every other category, whether it's airlines or it's think of Amazon. Amazon has their store business, but what Amazon also does, it invites more than 6 million third-party sellers to sell on Amazon. They are competing with Amazon, or Amazon competing with them in their own stores, if you will. But what does it do? It solves something, the jobs to be done for you and me, because when I go onto Amazon, I get all the selection from Amazon, and I get all the selection of 6 million other small sellers like myself, for example, that actually also sells on Amazon. And Amazon does the fulfillment, as you see. So it's this competition, this partnership, if you will, what we call an ecosystem. And if that is powered by what consumers really want, which is the digital part of that, the digital ecosystem, the exchange of data and analytics through technology, I think that it's a win-win I think it's a way that a company wins, and it's a way consumers win. I think it's the ticket forward.
Yeah, and I also think, to kind of get back to the current pandemic we're in right now, it's also the way that many communities are solving some of the healthcare, social, education situations and challenges we're facing right now, right? It's the supply chain was really challenged when COVID first hit, especially in the US and other places in the world, when things shut down. Yeah. That the supply chain of parts and food and supplies and all that was really taxed. And the lack of investment in many companies was highlighted, unfortunately, because of the fact that when the supply chain broke down, there was no plan B. They didn't have another partner if that supply chain partner was all of a sudden out of business. They didn't have this sort of scenario plans of what happens if this happens in our business. And so I think it's really forced a lot of companies to look at everything and consider what are ways we could be doing things differently. But something as simple as even Salesforce, our CEO made a commitment that he wanted to get PPE equipment and donate it and get it flown into the US and get it distributed to the cities and states that needed it. And it was like 5 million units. And that's not our business, right? But it was like going back to that 10th path, right? Doing well by doing good. If you can, you should. And so, now we've got a new partnership with CVS in the US, which is a local sort of pharmacy drugstore. Mm-hmm. And you'd be like, what is Salesforce doing with CVS? Well, we've created a product during this time called work.com, right? Pivoting towards saying, what's the job to be done? Well, the job to be done is many businesses have to get their people back to the office. That's the job that needs to get done. We had other solutions across the portfolio that was for scheduling and those kinds of services, if you will. And we said, couldn't we apply that to say, look, if you have 100 people who need to go back to the office, how do you do it in a way that you could stagger them throughout the day so that they could show up to work and be safe, feel secure? If you're going to have a team meeting, like in our Salesforce Tower in San Francisco, it's massive. We've got, 15 or 20 floors. There's usually 20 people crammed in each elevator. Now you can have 2. Like, how do you get that many people to work? It's not possible at the same time. So that was one part of it. The other part of it was the whole safety and testing and sanitation equipment and cleaning equipment and masks and all that. And so if you put the two of those together, that is a really unlikely partnership, but solves a job to be done, which is right now people are trying to get people back to the office. And so we can't do it alone. They can't do it alone. And so looking across the landscape right now, I challenge everybody listening, what could your company be doing to make a difference in your community? Because remember, all your employees live in that community, in your cities, in your towns, in your states, in your countries, just in the broader world. What can you do to add value? Who do you know? How could you collectively come up with a solution for some job that needs to be done? And I think that's what's really inspiring to me right now, is watching brands come together, companies, and unlikely partnerships, if you will, to really try and make the world a better place. I mean,
In my book, I talk about how not just the jobs to be done, but you say, what are some of the major industry problems we have, and we some frictions and some pain points that we can solve for. Think about how you buy a car and what Tesla does in order to solve the car experience. And third, what is the larger question, the societal problems that we face with the CO2 emission, let's say, and can we build a company that solves, as you said, I love this so much, the jobs to be done right now, rather than what products we need to sell in order to make our targets. Let's start thinking about what's the jobs to be done right now, and then again, at the next level, what is the industry problems we solve and societal problems. That's the interaction field. Wow, Tiffany, that is so great what I hear from you.
Yeah,
I'm
and when you bring up Tesla, it's a great example. Like Tesla's battery technology, did they keep it or did they share it?
Exactly. I mean, it's a prime example. And why would you share? Why would you develop a technology that is so proprietary to you, and then share it with every other car company? And that's where we need. That's the kind of thinking we need there.
Well, so here's the example I use there. So a simple little USB cord.
Yeah.
In your car, on your phone, on your TV, on your laptop, on your desktop, on your gym equipment, whatever. It's a USB, right? And so in many ways you can say that is co-opetition at its finest, right? Because when you buy a Dell or an HP or a Sony, or you buy, you know what I mean? You buy, a Honda or a Volkswagen or a BMW or whatever. It is a USB. Now, on the other side of it, that's where it gets proprietary. For people like you and I who travel for a living, like I don't want 10 cords. I just don't, but sure enough, I look at something and I go, okay, let me pull out of my bag, because everything's a USB, but on the other side, everyone decides they want to be proprietary, right? And so what does that do? It delivers a terrible experience for me. And, you could say one of the brands you've mentioned, right, to change the other end a couple of times is really frustrating, right? Because you've invested all this stuff, and then it would be really great if they had thought about it and said, come to the store, turn in your old ones, and we'll give you a new one for $5 or whatever, right? But what you've told me now is the 10 I have laying around everything, I have to buy again, right? Or let me change the size just ever so slightly so your case doesn't work anymore. Like that kind of stuff, is it's customer centric in some ways, right? But I like when you say, I think people don't realize this USB or a mouse or Bluetooth, like those things became standard, even though it aligns competitors. It's about us as consumers.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, it's time for me to very rudely interrupt here. And I think I've got time for one question before we wrap up. Just one question, because I didn't want to interrupt you. The two of you had such fantastic conversation going on. That'd be rude of me. So we've got...
Buy this book.
Thank you.
So a question here from Andrew. Do you have examples of collaborative working when conflicts of interest are raised, e.g. commercial or principal-led, and how should companies deal with them?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think if you're in a highly regulated industry, sometimes those partnerships are impossible, if not really, really difficult. But if it's internal concerns and internal processes and internal policies that are keeping you from it, the fastest way I can say to overcome that, I wouldn't say fast, I'd say a suggested way to overcome that is to actually ask customers what they want. So I'm going to go back to my very basic USB example, right? If you ask the customers, do you want to have 10 different cords or do you want one cord? They would say, I want one cord. Or they'd say, what's the greatest hassle about you traveling with all your electronics? And then really listen. You're going to hear that they're going to say it's such a hassle. So many power cords, so many USB connectors, so many whatever it might be. And you can go, if I could create some synergy, in the community, it would deliver better service to all of us. And so sometimes it's as easy as that. Now, if you are in a highly regulated industry, could you create a consortium? Could you create an alliance of like-minded companies or companies that maybe even compete and say, how do we get together and solve this problem? And then maybe we go and try to get the legislation or the rules or the governance laws, whatever it might be, overturned or changed to be more modernized, because I'm guessing they were probably written sort of pre-2000, and you could argue that so much is different for 21st century business around access to bandwidth and technology and the sort of flattening of the world. And we're having a conversation in 3 parts of the world, and 10 other countries are listening in, and we're doing all this very seamlessly. And that happens because people get together and say, how do we solve these problems in a better way? We can't just let that it's not the way we do things, or it's not the way we've been allowed to do things, stand in our way. As long as it's legal and you're not going to hurt somebody, you know, I'm all for trying to get people together to solve those big problems.
Here's the thing I conclude with. Value creation, or value is created in this new world through collaboration, participation, and connection, and not through competition. You know, I think that we outlived the world of one competes against the other, and I think that's where value creation is. And how do you create that value? You start looking at the customer, jobs to be done, and so forth.
Yeah, and I would say this. I'd say the question that was asked, the 2 words, conflict of interest, right? Those 3 words. Mm-hmm. Is it a conflict of interest because, you know, internal leadership feels like they're competing against you? Is it a conflict because you're both sharing the same customer, and who owns the customer? Is it a conflict because, you know, what's the reason that there's a conflict? And if it's because your executives or your company feels like you're losing a little bit of control or giving away a little bit of control, that's all about you. That's not an outside in view, that's an inside out view. And so, you know, I really recommend, whether you read Clayton Christensen's book, Competing Against Luck, which just really highlights jobs to be done. There's multiple books about jobs to be done. One by Alex Osterwalder, who, you know, is from Switzerland, who does everything around the business model canvas. He's another thinker, great content. To understand what that means, and then you can figure out what is it you're really trying to solve, and then understand what are those conflicts, and are they imaginary conflicts? Are they regulatory conflicts? Are they brand and control conflicts? Like, what is the conflict? And then from there, you can try to work your way through it.
Fantastic. So I want to finish with one question for you, Tiffany. So we're talking here about some businesses that are going through difficult times at the moment. The pandemic, hopefully they have got through the oh crap, how are we going to survive part, and they're now on to the how are we going to get out of this. For you, from the context of looking at your growth strategies, what would your main piece of advice be for a business that's maybe looking to find their growth through the period you're in, rather than just sticking to survival?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we did some work here at the Office of Innovation at Salesforce, and we found 3, we did it alongside Deloitte, we found 3 sort of very key work streams. The first one was stabilize, the second one was back to the office or back to work, and the third one was back to growth. And the recommendation was literally that you had different teams or different people, depending what size organization you are, focused on each one of those tracks. And what's the work underneath it? Because from a stabilized perspective, as an example, you may be coming in and out of a lockdown, which means you're having to restabilize every single time, but you're learning more each time. Back to work was the original term, and I'm like I'm still working, even though I'm working from home. I'm actually busier now than I was when I was flying around the world. And so it's not really back to work as much as it is back to the office. And what does that look like, right? Keeping your employees safe. The third one is back to growth, and they're not sequential. They could be happening simultaneously, and I think that's a great way to frame it up. Now, to go back to your question about how to deal with things, I'd say from a growth IQ perspective, number one, make sure your people are okay. Look, this is a really stressful time. Mental health and awareness and stress is at an all-time high. Burnout is at an all-time high. We have to make sure we're taking care of our people. So with that as a foundation, now I'll pivot to the 2 or 3 paths in my book that I think are most relevant today. The first one would be optimizing the way you sell. Look, businesses do 2 things. They make stuff and they sell stuff. I'm oversimplifying, but that's the easiest way. And so if you're going to make something, a service, a product, even if it's someone else's, you want to sell it. And so making sure you're doing it in a way that is seamless. You're now engaging with customers in these new channels. Your field sellers may not be in the field anymore. You know, you have to be more empathetic and understanding of all the challenges they're going through. You know, do you have the right systems and processes in place? So optimizing sales just helps you be more predictable more productive with the same set of tools and people that you have, and remove a lot of the friction that's been built up over time. The next growth path would be customer experience, like making sure that your customers are having a good experience and that it's not longer for them to get an answer because you're not at the office. You have to solve those problems. Like, so it's spinning up a new technology. Like, we've seen a huge influx of people investing in chatbots for customer service, because the call center is not open all the time from a human perspective, to make sure you're still servicing customers. So the experience is really important. And the third one, which I think is a growth lever, is selling into the base of customers you already have. They know you, they trust you, they've already made a decision, you're a brand that they want to do business with. And so how do you make sure that in case they want more from you, especially if you're in an industry where they need to repurchase what you sell, how do you get that recency and frequency to increase their share of wallet, their basket size, all of those things into the base? Those are the three I sort of tell people right now. And then the others that we talked about: partnership, co-opetition, and then doing well by doing good. There's really, all the paths are applicable right now. But when people say, look, if we could only do one or two things, what would it be? I'd say, first, take care of your employees. Second, take care of your customers.
Fantastic. That is brilliant. Tiffany, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom this afternoon.
Thank
all you
so
people out there, you're welcome. All you people who are watching either live or watching again, go and buy Tiffany's book. And while you're at it, go and buy Erich's book as well. And if you feel like it, buy my book, but that's no pressure there. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining, for asking questions. And Tiffany, you are doing another stream this afternoon. It's LinkedIn Live Day for you. So what time should what time should people come back to LinkedIn to be able to see your stream this afternoon?
I think it's at noon. But it's going to be a great conversation with Roger Martin. He's another Thinkers 50.
Oh, fantastic.
And I've interviewed him in the past, but he's got a new book coming out, so we're going to talk about that. So, it's a wonderful community amongst the Thinkers 50. Today is actually the Hall of Fame is being announced for the Thinkers. So it's an exciting day for our community.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And thank you again, Erich. We're going to leave it here, and please come and join us again. We're going to be doing more of these shows next week. And that's us for today. Thank you, everyone. Tiffany, Erich, audience, we love you all. See you again.
See you.
Bye.